Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our pre-concert discussion with Laurie Stras, director of Musica Secreta. Their program, Mother, Sister, Daughter, is the second of our 14 concerts in this 2022 Bloomington Early Music Festival. I am Carolann Buff, assistant professor of music at Indiana University's Jacobs School of Music and member of the board of Bloomington Early Music. I am delighted to have this conversation today with my dear friend and colleague about the program, the ensemble, and some of Laurie's recent research. With a background in performance, including a spell as a musical director and keyboard player with the Royal National Theatre, Laurie Stras is now a leading authority on Renaissance female musicians. As director of Musica Secreta, Laurie has produced several world-class recordings of music by and for women in the Renaissance. She is also an excellent scholar, writing not only on women in music during the Renaissance, but also on popular women performers in the mid-20th century. Of exceptional note, her 2018 monograph, Women and Music in 16th Century Ferrara, was awarded the Otto Kinkledye Award from the American Musicological Society. The Kinkledye Award is for a book of exceptional merit. Laurie is Professor Emerita of Music at the University of Southampton and Research Professor of Music at the University of Huddersfield. Greetings, Laurie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for talking to me.
Oh, it's just really utterly a delight. I have to say, I got a little sneak peek of the program for today, and people are in for a real treat. So thank you so much for putting it together.
Oh, it's such a delight of a program. We spent 4 days filming and recording together in Cambridge, and every time we make another CD, every time we devise another program, it feels like we are getting closer and closer to what feels like honest music making with this material. It's not that it's a kind of there's a veneer or a 20th century conventions, but maybe it feels like we're stripping away some of the things that we think we ought to be doing, and then finding the things that really come out in the music. And I just can't wait for people to hear it.
Oh, well, wonderful. Yeah, that's a really wonderful sentiment. I think that's amazing to find out that, you're kind of digging into finding like the real body of not only what this music is, but who the people were who were performing this music.
I was listening this morning to a podcast with Robert Burton talking about knowledge, and he said something that felt really honest to me, that you don't really know. You can't change people's minds through facts. You change their minds through stories and through narratives, and that's what I really wanted to get to grips with in this program, that we're telling stories about the women. When we sing the music, we're telling stories about the women, but the women are also telling stories about themselves, and they're telling stories to each other. And that element is really what I want to continue exploring. Now that we've kind of felt like I've grasped that little thread, I want to keep following it now.
Yeah. Well, so tell me a little bit about the ensemble, Musica Secreta. It's a kind of, first of all, it's a really interesting title or name for an ensemble. It's not really about secrets, is it?
No, it's not. The ensemble was started really actually back in the 1980s by my best friend and until very recently co-director Deborah Roberts, the soprano. She put the group together to investigate the madrigal repertoire that's associated with Concerto di Dame at Ferrara, and they were known as the Musica Secreta, so that was the name that she chose for the group, and it's kind of stuck.
Right.
So at this stage, there's no reason to change the name of the group, but the group has evolved from looking at that very narrow repertoire to expand. It's expanded across the centuries and into sacred music, and it's just evolved as a group over 30 years.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you do in an ensemble. First of all, you're only sopranos and altos. Is that right?
Yep, only sopranos
and instruments.
And instruments. Although all of our singers are, and this goes for the amateur choir as well. We want our singers to explore all of their ranges, because women can sing with huge range, but you tend to be stuck in a particular range if you're singing music for mixed voices. Your sopranos know where they are in the chord, altos know where they are in the chord, and the minute you start singing with female voices alone, and particularly when you're singing this voci pari music, equal voice polyphony, any one of those 4 or 5 voices can be at the top or the bottom of the sonority at any one time, and the ranges tend to be bigger. You're often singing an octave and a fourth.
Right.
So yes, we have the specialist sopranos, yes, we have the specialist altos, but that doesn't mean that people don't get a chance to explore their ranges. And also exploring their own vocal timbres. This is something that has become increasingly important to me as a director and a kind of curator and or animateur. I don't even feel like a director. I just feel like I'm a facilitator at this stage. Getting the singers, we're all taught and spend a lot of our professional lives blending with each other and creating that blended sound, which is fabulous when you're singing unison chant. It's great when you are singing 2 voices per part or 3 voices per part. But when you're singing 1 voice per part in equal voices, blended sounds don't help the ear follow the polyphony. Yes. So I've been really encouraging the singers to nurture their own timbres. I mean, obviously vowels have to match,
right?
But each one of our singers has a really quite different sound, and although they can blend together, it's really nice when you can hear all those different timbres kind of accentuating the polyphony. It also helps with the storytelling. One of the pieces in the concert is this Vespers of St. Lucy, where it just the music itself lends itself to storytelling. So that with the solo voices, having the solo voices speaking to each other, you really can hear those different sounds. It would sound lovely if all the voices sounded the same, but I don't think it would sound like narrative. I don't think it would sound like people telling each other something, a beloved story.
Yeah. And especially that beautiful story of St. Lucy too. And I think that's interesting in the program, right? We see a real focus on, these saints that would be particularly important to a convent. Someone like St. Lucy, for instance.
Oh yeah, I mean the Virgin Saints. Those offices are like some of the oldest offices in the whole liturgy. But the story of St. Lucy is, I think, really special to women. That her mother is ill. It's in the matins it has, it says that she's suffering from a hemorrhagic illness, and I kind of thinking, mother, is she perimenopausal? What's going on? Yeah. And Lucy prays to St. Agatha to heal her mother, and Agatha comes back to her and says, you don't need to pray to me. You can do this yourself. You are a holy virgin. And it occurred to me that this was the one conversation in the liturgy that would pass the Bechdel test. You know?
Right, two women talking to each other about something other than men. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when two women talk to each other in the liturgy, it's often about Christ, it's often about God, but no, here we're talking about genuine women's problems.
Right. And you imagine, something, an illness of that ilk. I mean, this is really fascinating to think of these women working all together and speaking to each other and having a voice. And then you've taken it and now it is here in the voices of other women who are speaking to each other.
Yeah, yeah. And these voices just, those stories reach to us across the centuries.
Well, can we talk a little bit more about the question of, well, my understanding is a lot of these pieces were published in their time, but they weren't necessarily published as necessarily just for high voices. Is that true, or is that not true, or I guess not published also in manuscript as well?
Yeah. Well, notated, I would say, because some of them eventually, I suppose, will be published. Not a lot, actually. This disc, not a lot of them are published, but yeah. Now, much of this music that we are singing on the disc is actually notated in soprano clefs, in G clefs or high C clefs. But specifically, when you're looking at this, the manuscript, the Bifoli Sostegni manuscript, which we know comes from a convent. We know which convent now it comes from. It's got the names of nuns on it. It's got pictures of nuns. You can't. It's a nun's manuscript, and even then, it's about a third of the pieces in the book are notated in tenor and bass clefs.
Interesting.
So I think nuns are perfectly capable of transposing. And so in some of them, they're still notated in lower clefs, but the actual notes are transposed, the psalm tones are transposed. But yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't really matter. You know where your final is, and off you go. And some of the music that we've done before is when it's in manuscript, it's in high clefs, but by the time it gets published, it's published down. Okay. So I think that we forget that publishers are mediators. Mm-hmm. And particularly the Gardano press, there's like a brand consciousness. He likes everything to be uniform. So things get presented in uniform clefs that, when you see them in manuscript, they're in all sorts of different clefs, but Gardano tidies it all up. And I think we've got used to that idea that, right, this music is, if it's in low clefs, it's got to be sung by low voices. And the manuscripts disprove that. But women are infinitely adaptable, and nuns clearly can sing music from low clefs. They just transpose it. You transpose it up a fourth, you transpose it up an octave, and you get on with it. I mean, Carolann is really interesting from that point of view. I mean, she's publishing in the mid 17th century, and when she publishes her music, she publishes it in soprano, alto, tenor, bass. She publishes the music for mixed voices, but she's so clearly transposed the music down.
Right. Yeah.
Because when you transpose the bass and the tenor up an octave and you perform those Carolann pieces with high voices, it reveals so much else about it reveals something else about the music that I don't think you hear when it's sung in mixed. Perfectly possible to sing it in mixed voices, don't get me wrong. Composers are not fools, and when they publish something that has integrity. Mm-hmm. But she's going to get more sales if she publishes in mixed voices and then just lets the nuns do whatever they do.
Love this title, like of mother, sister, daughter. So all of these roles roles. These are positions where women have voices.
Yeah, and so there's two ways in which we which we think about those words. I mean, they're obviously all words that pertain to the Virgin Mary, and women have role models in the liturgy. That's how they learn how to be women, really, is through the Bible, through the women of the Old Testament, the saints, and the Virgin Mary. These are their role models. So models, it's not a bad word. And so we have music for the Virgin Mary that stresses those roles for her. We had to include Vespere Autem Sabbati that I've attributed to Eleanora d'Este, because it has Mary's sister, Mary Salome, in it. So it's like, yes, she's even a sister, even as a sister. But also sisterhood in terms of community. And so the big work in the program is this double vespers for St. Clare, these really extraordinary antiphons that come from the Bifili Sostegni manuscript, which, as I've said, has its origins in a particular convent, in the convent of San Matteo in Arcetri. And this is a poor convent. We're not talking about one of the big, well-appointed convents in the middle of Florence, which is where I thought it came from. But then just before the pandemic struck, I found that the origin of the manuscript really is this really quite small, poor convent outside of Florence, which is familiar to people who have read Dava Sobel's book Galileo's Daughter, because Suor Maria Celeste Galilei was professed in that convent with her sister in the first decades of the 17th century. Now, one of the things that doesn't come across in Dava Sobel's book, because she's thinking more about science than she is thinking about anything else, is that Maria Celeste was given the job of choir mistress about 5 years before she died. And so she says in her letter that she's teaching the novices Gregorian chant, and that she has the job of the day-to-day performance of the day-to-day enactment of the office in the chapel. So it is almost impossible to resist the idea that she had this. She worked with this manuscript when its owner, or one of its owners, the last of its owners, Clemencio Sostegni, died in 1606. Her belongings would have reverted to the convent. And then, anything that they needed to dispose that would be useful for another nun, they would sell on to another nun, but that manuscript would have stayed. And so it's, I feel it's impossible to resist.
Yes,
that Maria had this. But this is, they are this little self-contained community out in the middle of nowhere, or not, not quite nowhere.
The hills, like around Florence, right? Yeah.
In the southern hills, it's close enough to the Palazzo Pitti, and it's right there where Galileo is, but it's out of the city. And this feast of St. Clare, I've been into their account books. Books. There's one account book left from the 16th century, and there's a huge amount of food that they buy for their community. And the community doesn't just include the sisters, but their families, the friars from the convent down the road. They come along and they have this big feast, and they would have sung these antiphons. And they're unusual because normally you have the psalms are the things that are sung in polyphony, and the antiphons stay in chant. But these are, unique to the 16th century. The only other complete set of Vespers antiphons are in those Verona books. Right. In fact, those the Lucy one, there's two sets of Lucy antiphons. We only recorded one of them for the program, but the Clare are unique in that they are fully formed 16th century polyphony, and they are based on the antiphon chants, but they aren't cantus firmus. They're full polyphonic workings. And for three very high voices and one voice that is, about a third to a fifth below. So these are really expert.
Wow.
There are parts for really expert singers. And yeah, they tell the whole liturgy of St. Clair tells her story. It tells about her becoming a holy woman, about her negotiation in creating her order, about her death, and then her sister Agnes dies and follows her into heaven, and there they are looking down on their community of sisters. And the very last thing that you sing, the Salve Sponsa Dei, the last antiphon for the Magnificat. So that's the last bit in the settings. The text is about the community again. You got right back into the community. The sisters are really singing it for themselves, right? And that very last, and it's also that very last antiphon, the Salve Sponsa Dei, is in itself, it's unique amongst the unique settings, because it is a we have no word for it, but polychant. It's a polyphonic rendering of the chant harmonized as if it were being extemporized in that technique contrapuntualmente. You can see in that harmonization that's what it's meant to sound like, that they've written down the notes. So maybe not these women aren't so expert in the techniques of extemporization that they could do it for themselves, but they know what it sounds like and they're recreating that sound. And it's kind of otherworldly. It's not what we're used to at all, but that's the final thing that they sing. And it's as if they're collapsing their time frames, and then we're collapsing the time frame again by singing it in the 21st century. It's something, it's really it's time travel. That's what it is. It's just time travel. And they're time traveling in the 16th century too.
Oh, fabulous. Well, Laurie, I think this will bring us to the end of our time. I could talk to you for a really long time about this, but I'm so fascinated. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. What a wonderful conversation. And I'm really looking forward to the program. I know I'm going to enjoy it, and I certainly hope our listeners do.
I'm so excited for you to hear it. I'm just like, I can't wait.
Oh, great. Well, so I'll leave us with a little description about your program. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're looking forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Carolann.
The Bloomington Early Music Festival 2022 is proud to present for you Musica Secreta's newest program, Mother, Sister, Daughter. This program celebrates women's spiritual relationships and the stories they tell, with music honoring the Blessed Virgin Mary and communities of sisters in early modern Europe. Drawn from 15th and 16th century sources, many linked to convents, the program includes motets by Eleanora d'Este, works by anonymous, potentially female composers, and songs by dissenting women, brought to life by this magnificent, internationally renowned all-women ensemble, Musica Secreta, directed by Laurie Stras.